Welcome to Healing the Workplace, a collaboration between Heal Magazine and Ludas, where we explore how people are navigating work, identity, and mental health in times of uncertainty. I'm your host, Axelle Aronzo, and my co-host is Selma Lemsadi. Today, I'm joined by Nicole Sura, writer and career strategist behind Shower Bear, an Instagram platform known for naming the emotional truths people rarely say out loud at work. The quiet thread, the over adaptation, the moment you realize you're no longer engaged, but you're not leaving either. This season, we're asking how people adapt at work in times of uncertainty. Today's question sits right in the middle of that tension. Is quiet quitting a strategy or a symptom? Hi, Nicole. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. The first question I have for you today is, when you look at the workplace right now, what kind of uncertainty do you see people living inside of?
I think it's the same uncertainty that has always existed, but right now it's a lot worse. At least in America, I think a lot of people are afraid to lose their jobs. And it's this looming threat that is, I think everybody is walking around with the sense of dread and stress. And working is stressful enough. So having that added on top of it, I can absolutely see in, the people around me, how much it's affecting them. But again, I think this is something that has always been around. Even if it feels like your job is safe, that's almost never the case. So I think in those times where the threat felt a little bit less looming, it was still always there. We just weren't as aware of it.
Mm-hmm. So I like this way you're already kind of describing uncertainty as something that will always be there, but it will vary in intensity as in our human experience. Many people say that nothing is technically wrong, but I don't feel safe. What do you recognize in that?
I think that's like such a part of life, like we have our just innate fear to keep surviving, like a fear of death that expands and extends to so many other parts of our life. And we can't recognize it for what it is, which is just a survival instinct. And work is a place where that shows up a lot because, it's how you make money. It's how you support yourself. It's like your livelihood, your lifestyle, your comfort, like starvation, all of it depends on your ability to keep your job. So it absolutely makes sense that base core human fear of death is so prevalent in the workplace because that is the biggest thing that we can do to control how we show up and survive in this life.
So how does prolonged uncertainty show up in the body before, people can articulate it from a more lived experience perspective?
Physiologically, it shows up, maybe not right away, but eventually it does. For me, at least, it showed up as panic attacks. I was having a lot of anxiety. I was having a lot of panic. For other people, like back pain. For my mom, for example, like she had debilitating back pain that like took her out of the corporate world. I think it's different for everybody, but sometimes also difficult to connect those physiological symptoms with that more emotional state of feeling uncertainty, feeling triggered, feeling uncomfortable. It's hard to sometimes connect those two because they don't always seem to be connected. For me, when I was having panic attacks, I could not, I was just like, oh, something's wrong with my body. It felt really physiological. It did not feel emotional at all. Didn't feel like a symptom of stress. So I think, uncertainty, all this to say, uncertainty creates fissures and cracks between our mind-body connection as well. And it puts us in this state of fear of survival, which inherently makes us disconnected from ourselves and makes us not able to pinpoint like what symptoms are connecting to each other and how to actually solve it. I think a lot of people try to solve the symptom, like, okay, panic attacks, like, let me get a prescription for Xanax and keep going and keep doing what I'm doing, where really like that's, not necessarily the solution. And the solution is to take a more holistic approach to figuring it out and looking at my life in general and emotions and stress and everything, taking all of that into account.
When you spoke of panic attacks, it reminded me when it went into lockdown and in 2020, and I would jump on these like team calls, and I would start just crying during these team calls, but I wasn't able to name what was happening, but my body was reacting for me. And a couple months or months after, of course, I had my burnout, and when I look at it in retrospect today, I was like, my body was speaking for me before I could connect the dots. So I find it very powerful what you're naming there, indeed.
Yeah, absolutely. That was happening with me as well. Like before I even figured out exactly what was happening, it was that the body showing up and like asking for help. And I do see that quite often, actually. Like before I can even address a problem, it's first something that my body makes sure I can't ignore it. I also think that like that feeling of uncertainty that we were talking about and kind of clinging on to the job because of that survival fear coming up. It also, for me at least, I saw that it wasn't allowing me to actually evaluate if that job was right for me. And it's also a huge reason why people stay in jobs that are them burnout, draining them, something just not misaligned with what they actually want in this life. And I think the same way that uncertainty and that survival fear makes us disconnected from our body and disconnected from understanding how these physical symptoms, like why they're happening and how they're connected to that fear. It's the same thing with like whether we are happy where we are emotionally. There's like emotional and physical cracks that happen when we are in this state of uncertainty and survival for so long.
At what point does this uncertainty trigger what we call like disengagement and starts becoming corrosive?
I mean, I think it's the same as those physical symptoms showing up. It's maybe initially not something conscious. You're not understanding why you're feeling burnt out, why you're extra tired, why you have no motivation. I think it's, initially probably not something that we are conscious of, but then eventually it's the same thing as with the physical symptoms. It becomes too much to bear. The timeline on when that starts to happen is different for everybody. But again, that like through line that I've seen with people who have experienced, burnout and physical symptoms due to uncertainty and survival is that it starts very unconsciously. Like you don't actually know what's happening with you. Or at least again, that with my experience and with the people I've talked to it's just something that builds and builds and builds until it becomes too much. And then you have to take another look at your life.
It's already giving us an indication that we can use the body as a compass. The same way it's a indicator of something going wrong, maybe coming back to the body might be the solution as well.
Yeah, I think so. I really think so. I think the body, and then just, I think general, like how you're feeling emotionally day to day, like, and noticing any like big trends, because obviously our emotions change throughout the days. You won't like be forever happy at your job 100% of the time, but there are certain, I think, indicators both physically and emotionally that show up that kind of give you a clue that something needs to change.
When work starts to feel predictable, unsafe, or just constantly draining, people don't always explode or resign. Sometimes they simply withdraw. They protect their energy, and that quiet withdrawal is what we've come to call quiet quitting. Quiet quitting is often framed as empowerment from the employee's perspective or disengagement, resistance from the leadership's perspective. Nicole, what do you think it's actually responding to?
I think it is, we're talking about how that uncertainty and that stress comes from the survival instinct to survive and keep the job, right? Like it's where we work and our ability to make money. It indicates like health insurance, at least in the United States, money for food, money for a place to stay. Like it's tied in so much into survival. And I think that our response to it is also a survival instinct. Like when I was quiet quitting at work and doing a lot of time theft and just building those boundaries around myself to make myself feel less stressed out, it felt like I was doing this as a means of survival. Like it felt like actually that serious. And so, I think a lot of what I talk about online is how time theft and quiet quitting is really important, and I give tips on how to do it. Sometimes people say they're unethical, but again, like my perspective is this is a means of survival. Like, and again, I know that sounds dramatic. It's actually that serious. Your survival fear is being triggered, and so you deal with it.
I love how you called it time theft. It's a nice way to picture it.
Yeah, you're stealing it back, basically, right?
Or reclaiming back your time also in that sense. Definitely you're organizing your time better so that you can take care of yourself. Indeed.
Yeah. I think a lot of the times we aren't able to, in these environments, just come right out and be honest about what our needs are, what our boundaries are, and how we need the workplace to be structured so that we can actually feel at peace within it. And so if that's not possible, if you voicing these things will come with repercussions, then the only thing you can do is carve that out for yourself. And like you said, Axelle, reclaim it. And even if it does seem a little bit, like unethical or like you're lying or something, it really is a way to reclaim those boundaries, because if we don't do that, then our boundaries will never be respected. So it's a means to an end.
Can you maybe name an example of advice that you give on social on what does that look like, quiet quitting? Like what is something someone can do to protect their energy?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a big one that people struggle with is being overworked, like feeling burnt out because they simply are expected to put in more hours than they physically can. I mean, the 40-hour work week minimum is not actually sustainable. Like it's not actually like something that we can do. Working 8 hours a day is not physically possible, and yet we're expected to do it. And so a lot of people, they burn out, they are overworked, they feel exhausted. And so a lot of the tips that I give is to alleviate some of that. So for example, like, you're given a project and you're told to estimate how long it's going to take you to do it. I tell people double it. Like however long you think it's going to take you, double it. That's a big one. Also, just like if you need a sick day or if you need to take a day off, lie and say you're sick. It's okay to lie and say you're sick. I think people feel guilty about that. You're not going to get a day unless you lie. Like they're not going to be okay with it for the most part. Again, this also depends on your environment, like your work environment. Some people have great work environments and they don't need to do any of this, but the majority of people, they don't. And so those are really the main things, is to really advocate for people to not get to a place where they are exhausted and burnt out and on their deathbed.
So at what point does protecting yourself turn into completely disappearing?
Well, I mean, I think it's a balance to to strike, I always say that to be a good time thief, to be someone who can set those boundaries for yourself and reclaim that time, the first step is being good at your job. I think it's a really important foundation to build initially, is to be someone that people know, like, you get good work done, so you don't have to be like as policed. And so if like the fear is that you'll disappear without like, and that's not under your control, it's about all of this needs to be very conscious and intentional. This isn't something like that I'm kind of throwing out like willy-nilly, just, whatever, I don't feel like working today. It's intentional. I'm checking in with my body and saying, how do I feel today? Okay, I feel extremely exhausted. Okay, so that means I need to take a day off. I'm going to say I'm taking a sick day. So it is like this conscious way to build a life. It's more likely that you will lose yourself in the work without being a time thief than you will lose yourself in being a time thief. So it's, what I'm saying is, you're more likely to overwork yourself and burn out than you are to stop working entirely, because like you've lost yourself in the time theft of it all, and like now you're doing no work and you're not, you're laying in bed all day. I think that's like a big fear that we have, is laziness, and like, oh well, what if I just lose all my willpower and I become lazy and I never do anything ever again? Like, that's not a fear that we need to even give any attention to. That doesn't happen. We're much more likely to burn out than we are to never do anything again.
Agree, but I do think that that many people fear that complete disengagement, right? That as soon as you stop caring, or that you kind of become disassociated, in the workplace.
And that can be a symptom of something greater, like actual burnout, like you've already gone past so many stages and you're like reaching the point where you become a bit cynical about work and whatnot.
But that's gonna happen if you continue to like operate the way that you're operating in that environment. Like, it's only a matter of time that you will become disengaged and that you will become dissociative. Like, that's just the progression of things. When you're under like that much stress and nothing is alleviating it, like that's the direction that you go into. And so if it's something that is really like a concern. I mean, first of all, like what I want to say is like, does it matter if you care about your job? Like, for some people, yes, for some people, no. I think that maybe for a lot of people, feeling like your job is life or death, it's probably a positive thing to move away from that and to care less, because the less emotional investment you have, the less you burn out, because the less like emotional heavy things that you're having every single day. So I don't necessarily think that it's a negative thing to like care less about your job. But if we're talking about like disengagement and disassociation, like in our lives because of this, then of course, like that's very uncomfortable. And I don't know, like not a way to live. Like, I want my life to be beautiful and exciting and peaceful, and I want to feel good and happy, and dissociation and disengagement, like those emotions don't go hand in hand. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like we have a choice. I think people forget that. Like, I think I get a lot of advice when I was leaving the corporate world. A lot of advice I got was like, it's just your job. It's just a job. Like, nobody likes their job. It's okay to hate your job. You actually have a choice. So you don't have to hate your job. I want more for myself. Like, okay, call me crazy, like shocker. I want more for myself than to hate what I'm doing every single day and feel burnt out, disengaged, disassociated, like stressed out. Of course, like some of those emotions will always be a part of work to a small extent, but I think when it starts to grow, you don't have to live like that.
Yeah.
You actually don't.
What strikes me in all that you're saying is that this approach to quiet quitting, or how someone is going to deal with what you call the more unethical aspect, or the responsibility how someone has towards their work, or how that responsibility also kind of manifests, that at the end of the day, it's also personal and it will fluctuate from person to person.
Yeah.
How do you how does that come across during the sessions you have with people you speak from your platform, or yeah, customers that you support?
Yeah, I think it is super personal. Like, I mean, some people don't experience this at all. Like some people, they love it. They're like, yeah, this is my job and I love it and I feel stressed out and that feels good for my body.
Yeah.
Great. That's great. But for most people, they kind of hit the same stages, but at different times. And I think it is like, how consciously are you in tune with your body? So for a lot of people, they stay in the stage where they're having physical symptoms for a very, very, very long time. And their body is just begging them to notice, begging them to notice, begging them to notice for a very long time. For some people, it's pretty quick, or they don't even get there. And they're like, I'm dissatisfied. I'm clocking out. And I think like what I'm seeing with the younger generations, to be honest, is, and not to make a generalization, but this is just what I've seen from the younger people I've talked to, is an unwillingness to even get to a place where their body is dying and they very quickly recognize like, no, I don't like this. This isn't for me. So again, I think like all the stages are more or less the same. It's just like, when are people, when do the alarms start to like make sense to them? And
yeah. I love that about Gen Z, that they're so much more bold about, setting those boundaries of like what they're being paid of, how their time is being used. It's such a contrast with previous generations. But at the same time, I think that millennials have also contributed for that to be possible. I see so many, either trainers that are there to coach managers on how to deal with Gen Z employees, because it's a real factor in how to manage employees today. And it shouldn't be ignored that, people are setting new boundaries and they're taking care of themselves better. There's greater mental health awareness.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think that millennials did pave the way for like quiet quitting and time theft. Like that's kind of where those terms originated from, is from millennials. But then again, you see like people who are older than millennials, what is that, Gen X, and even like baby boomers, and what they're saying is like, suck it up, you need to suck it up, and like we never complained, so you stop complaining too. And it's like their ability to tolerate discomfort for their whole life, now we're supposed to tolerate the same discomfort, when again, like, we have a choice and we choose, nah. I'd actually rather be happy and comfortable. Like, is that so bad?
No,
it should
it's
be the
not.
bare
But I
minimum.
do wonder. Yeah, but I do wonder, like, to what extent is quiet quitting a privilege?
100%. Yes. I totally agree. I mean, it is a privilege.
Yeah, I think for many people, like, disengaging at work can carry like real risks, especially if they don't have any savings, or they're there on like company visa, or stuff like that. And they have no
there are
support
definitely,
system to fall back.
absolutely, there are certain things that make that survival fear way more intense, like those things that you mentioned. Not having a safety net is really what you're what you're describing. It makes that survival instinct a lot harder, and that's very real. Again, that's kind of like what we're contending with here, is the fear of finding something more aligned with you, because you're afraid you won't survive without the job that you're currently in. And so for some people that's worse than others, but like, you'd be surprised, even people who do have a safety net, who've been making a lot of money for years and have a nest egg, like they have a savings, they don't have kids, still these people have immense fear about moving on. And I think a lot of things go into it then. It's like societal norms, like people will think I'm a loser, people won't accept me. Like there's always something, whether or not you're privileged, that people are like, that's holding them back, that they're contending with. And I guess my point is like, whether it's legitimate or it's not legitimate, there's always some fear that is infused within people who, are battling with themselves, because on one hand they know that this life is not aligned with them, but on the other hand, like they can't figure out how to make that jump without putting themselves at risk, whether that risk is like legitimate and real or whether it's not. Not whether it's not, but whether it's, something that's less like physical, like starving, versus like your grandma not approving of your choice to leave your job. There's like
No,
levels
got
to
it.
this.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think there are also steps in that, right? Like quiet quitting can be quite a drastic one. There are probably
Mm-hmm.
like little steps that we can do before that even people in like very compromised situations can apply, but we'll get to that later.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. To be fair, like I was a time thief my entire career. I was quiet quitting my entire career. Every year I got promoted. Every year I got a raise. I was like in a very people would tell me that I have a very like bright future in corporate America. Like if I just stayed, I would have like climbed the ladder successfully. So I think like there's this misconception that quiet quitting and being a time thief is equivalent to being bad at your job or being on the brink of being fired. You could be extremely successful in your position and employing all of these tactics, because at the end of the day, it doesn't make you a worse employee. It doesn't make you worse at your job. Like I said, the first step is to be good at the job and have that foundation of like respect with your peers and your manager, and that skill set. And then time thieving is not going to make that worse for you. It's a very strategic way to move through the corporate world.
Yeah. I think it's also important to recognize that as we're speaking of like privilege and choice here, that like perhaps some work environments or practices, policies might enable or give room for more theft than in other companies. If I have a manager that's a micromanager and who's checking in on me every hour to see what I'm doing, and I decided to make my 8-hour workday a 4-hour workday that day, if my manager was on my back all the time, I wouldn't be able to do that. So it also shows like the level of like trust or psychological safety that exists in teams, and how you're trusted to do good work, especially if you've proven that you can do good work as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you're also describing. You're saying like, I was able to do this because I balanced the what you call unethical with that responsibility I had for doing my work well.
Yeah. Yeah. There are a few different levers or a few different elements that like definitely fluctuate and will affect, your level of quiet quitting. One of them is definitely like your level of like privilege and your safety net and how comfortable you feel even taking some of these risks. And then absolutely the other one is what the environment you're working in is. And so for some people, they're working in person. Way harder to time thief if you're working in person. For other people, like you said, they have like micromanagers. So it depends. Like, but whatever the element is, like you can still figure out a routine or a strategy that works for you. Sometimes you just have to get more creative, but the goal is to like set boundaries around yourself so that you can exist as peacefully as possible and you can protect yourself as much as possible. So that's always, it's always an option. It's always a choice that you can make. And it's not going to look the same for everybody. There are factors that change things for people, but again, you always have a choice to do it.
Yeah.
And it also always will make your life better.
You mentioned that you often frame quiet quitting as making a move that isn't dramatic, but still honest. What makes you say that?
Well, I think people think that quiet quitting has to be like never working again, or, like pawning all of your work off on your coworkers. It doesn't necessarily need to be that. Like, you would be surprised how much you can get emotionally out of like going on a walk and like blocking your calendar, saying you're in a meeting and going on a walk, and that's the quiet quitting that you do for that day, and then coming back and like doing your work. It's just about like building the boundaries that work the best for you, but it does not need to be something super dramatic or drastic.
Yeah.
You also don't need to like stand up at the all hands meeting and quit. Like it's about like making these small moves and seeing how they feel for you, and then adjusting accordingly. Like again, for me, I definitely could not work 8 hours a day. So I would, block my calendar accordingly to how much I could actually work that day. Meaning like I wouldn't allow my whole day to be scheduled with meetings. I would literally block my calendar and be like, I have a different meeting or something. So yeah, it definitely does not have to be these big moves. And that's why I think, people are saying like, oh, I don't have the privilege to do it, or I'm not in the environment that would.
I think to be able to do that, you need to stand quite firm in your shoes. And, some people might be a little bit more timid or might feel more insecure in the workplace. They might feel like they're not that good at their job, to do that or pull that off. So what would you tell them?
Yeah, I think what you're describing is definitely like self-esteem. Everybody deserves to be happy. Like that is, it's funny. I dated someone once who was like, this is sorry, a tangent. He was like, why are you saying that everybody deserves to be happy? Like, look at squirrels. Like squirrels aren't like their life purpose isn't happy. Like, look at the animals in this world. Like their life purpose isn't to be happy. And I'm like, we're not squirrels. I'm actually not a squirrel. Like that's why we deserve to be happy, because we're not squirrels. I think
squirrels are super happy. They're always like jumping around, living life.
Yeah, I'm like, what do you mean?
They seem super happy to me.
No, absolutely. I agree. But, it's like not something that they're not like, squirrels aren't like thinking in their heads, like, how do I be happy today? Right. They're just like, let me go get my nuts or whatever the hell squirrels do. But I think like when people start to not believe that they are worthy of being comfortable and being happy in their lives, that's when we start to get things like, well, I don't even deserve to be at this workplace, so I want to hold on to it as much as I can and like not do anything that rocks the boat. I think ultimately like people do need to get to this place first where they believe like, I deserve to be happy. I deserve to be here. My work stands on its own. I don't need to also work 10 hours a day. It's this like belief that needs to be built first of, I'm not doing anything wrong. I deserve to be here. That's like a huge part of being able to build those boundaries for yourself, is believe that you're worthy of these boundaries.
Yeah. And when we get to this ultimate, boundary, which is, what, this isn't really working out for me. You write about sensing endings before they make sense on paper. And earlier we're talking about, feeling in our body and whatnot. So how can people trust those signals without needing everything to line up? Like how do you trust your gut? How do you make sense of it?
That's a really good question. One that like so when I quit my job, I didn't have anything lined up. I didn't know what I was doing next. I didn't have another job lined up. I didn't like have a plan. And that was very intentional because I was so inundated with this mindset and the philosophy that I had built throughout corporate America, like very much like brainwashed into, hustle culture, thinking I have to work 10 hours a day to be productive and numbers and money. And I knew that like, that's not the same mentality that was going to bring me to a place where I was fulfilled in my career and in my work. Like I needed to completely reset. So I quit with no backup plan. And there was absolutely like a fear of like, okay, what if I don't figure anything else out? Definitely. And people tried to push that onto me even more. People would schedule calls with me and be like, what do you mean? Like, don't do this. This is, this is not something that's going to go well. Like, what if you need another job? And like the job market is so hard right now. And I had to like block that external input out because again, like they were operating from this place that I was trying to get away from. So why would I take advice from them? Around the same time, I read this book about tracking lions in the wild, very random. It's
I love you
quite
share a lot
good.
of
It's
animals during the, the
I
session.
know. Yeah. I mean, we can learn a lot from nature. I think that's what I'm kind of getting at here. It's called The Lion Tracker's Guide to Life. It's by this guy, Boyd Vardy. He is a wildlife conservationist. Him and his family have a wildlife reserve in South Africa. They run safaris. They do animal tracking. He also does a lot of public speaking and kind of helps people find their purpose. And in it, he's describing tracking lions, who are elusive creatures. It's hard to find them. And the way you find them is by following their tracks. And initially I thought that that meant like there's literal like paw prints in the dirt and you just follow those. But actually it's not that. It's actually quite difficult to do that. It's like you see that they have like brushed up against a leaf or something. And that's kind of how you track them. And, he has a quote in there, or I don't remember the exact quote, but what he says in there is, waiting until you know the destination before taking your first step is like expecting to go straight to the lion's den without first having to track the lion. You don't need to get straight to the lion. You just need that first track. And I think the same can absolutely be said about like finding, your next thing and leaving an environment that is toxic for you to pursue something that maybe is more aligned. Is you don't need to know the full journey. You don't need to know where you're going to end up. You just need to make that first step and you just need to start tracking towards that. And there's also I think it's Joseph Campbell, a quote from him that says, if you can see your life laid out in front of you step by step perfectly, that's not your life. Like your life is something that you're on the path of, you're walking. So it unfolds as you continue down that path. It's not something that you're ever going to see like in its totality. And I think a lot of us move into corporate America because we want that sense of certainty. It's really ironic that we go into corporate America because we want certainty, because we see other people taking this path of like, okay, here's the ladder that I'll climb, for example. Like we use that analogy a lot, is the ladder, where you can see every step, you can see every rung, you know what your life is going to turn out to be. But ironically, we become plagued with more uncertainty and more like stress and, survival, because that's not our life. Like that's not how life is. You can't have it mapped out perfectly. And like if you start making decisions because you want it to be, perfectly mapped out from beginning to end, like you won't end up somewhere that's aligned with you.
Yeah. And is there any other practice that you do around that, that, because you're speaking about trust in a way that for me makes me think of maybe spirituality, and I'm not talking about necessarily religion or whatever, but it's like just that trust, maybe manifestations, or just, how do you put that trust into the unknown until the uncertain, actually, as we're talking about uncertainty as well?
Yeah, I think like having some level of faith does help, because it does give you that trust like in yourself and in your life that like things will turn around. I think everybody has their own practice, but it helps to have some sort of faith. For me, what really helped is I read this book called The Artist's Way. And it's great. It's like, it's a 16-week program pretty much. Like every week you're reading a chapter and you're doing different exercises, and it's really geared towards getting you more in touch with your inner creative. And the thesis of the book is everyone is creative. Like, you know, a lot of people are like, I'm not creative. Everybody has that innately in them. And it's about like reconnecting with that and building that. And a lot of the exercises were getting back in touch with like your childhood self and who you were as a child, because that's before like any conditioning really set in. That's before like the fear of like, I have to survive, so let me be realistic, that set in. You were just playing and you were just exploring what was interesting to you. And that book really, really helps me, because it helps me figure out what track I wanted to follow, or at least like explore. You know, like for me, ever since I was a kid, I really liked to write. I really liked to go to museums. I really liked to make videos. And so, you know, I was just kind of using that as a guide to like, okay, what tracks do I want to follow and see if they lead anywhere? And they did. Like, it did lead me somewhere. I have a whole new career now. And again, like when I left corporate America, I had no idea what I was going to do. I did not quit to be a content creator. And now like it's been exactly a year. I'm a working content creator. Like you really never know. It's just about like taking that first step and, you know, giving yourself the ability to like play. I think it's also like scientifically proven to be impossible to be creative while you're in that fight or flight, while you're in that survival fear. You can't, like, your brain doesn't work that way. And so whatever you can do to like reset, take yourself out of that means quiet quitting. That means being a time thief. Like these things do like help boundary you from being burnt out and being stressed out, or whether it's leaving your job. I think there's different ways to do it, but getting yourself out of that mindset and that like physiological environment within yourself, that's kind of where the great work starts to happen, of like creativity and what do I want to do next, and like what do I even like, and what do I want to spend my time doing.
Yeah. Okay, so when I want to touch on the fact that you kind of tapped into your creative self and started creating all this content. It's been about a year now, and you have developed this like huge platform on Instagram. And my question is, what is the most common question you get from your community about quiet quitting?
It's funny. People ask me like, can you tell me what other options I have besides the job that I'm doing right now?
So again, the
you know,
question
like
of choice here.
Yeah. You know, people saying like, well, if it's not this job, then like what should I do? That's the biggest question, you know? And like, I wish I could answer that for you. That's what I always like think whenever I get that answer is, or that question is like, oh, I wish it was that easy that a stranger that like literally doesn't know who you are at all could tell you what you should do next. I wish I could tell you, but you need to figure that out yourself, because again, like if you don't want to get into the same position that you were in, which was like burnt out and dissatisfied, then the next step has to come from within you. It has to come based on like what you love, what your interests are, who you are. And I can't tell you like what the next step is. It's something that you absolutely have to like discern for yourself. And it kind of comes back to us really wanting certainty in our lives and wanting to like have a path that we can just follow. And there will always be uncertainty in your life, always, no matter what. That won't end.
So it's absolutely necessary to sit with yourself, like develop that self-awareness, like and no one else can do that for you, right? And you gave the example of the artist way, but there's like I guess many other ways that they can take. And we've spoken about how uncertainty is a given; it will always be there. And outside of the workplace, the world also feels unstable, and particularly in these days with the news cycle we're seeing and the geopolitical climate and whatnot, like the world is unstable as well. And so the real question becomes, how do you create stability from within you, from the inside?
Yeah, and I also wonder, like, when systems don't offer safety and the world outside work feels just as unstable, where can people, realistically anchor themselves?
I think just getting in touch with what you love and what makes you feel genuinely better, like going through your day and intentionally doing an activity and being like, how do I feel doing that, and how do I feel after? And then changing your day based on that input. Like, for example, I mean, my routine is really, really important to me. I think developing a routine that works for you. Like, for example, for me, like going on my phone a lot, I can see it makes my life worse. Like, I can see I am not as creative. I'm more angry. I'm more upset. I'm more scared. Builds a lot of fear. I'm comparing myself to other people. Like, it generates a lot of really negative emotions. And so I was like, okay, well, let me be on my phone less. Now my phone doesn't live in the same room as me ever, because if it does, I'll go on it. It's like these small things that you can build a practice for yourself. And boundaries like shouldn't just exist within your corporate job or your job in general, and it doesn't have to be corporate, but they also need to exist like for yourself, like, and that's where discipline comes in. So I think it's different for everybody, but absolutely, like building a routine that's filled with things that nourish you, and it
To
doesn't have to
some
be anything
extent,
dramatic.
basically to shut the world out at times so you can stay centered and stay in alignment. Of course, that's
Well,
not
I don't
always.
know if I would say like, I don't know if shut the world out is like what I would say, but just shift your focus on being entirely outward to being partially inward and nourishing yourself. And again, there is so much happening in the world that's devastating. And it makes us feel like, well, I don't deserve the life that I have. I don't deserve the privilege that I have. You deserve happiness, like everybody does. And a lot of people in this world don't have it right now. They're suffering. And so it's all the more reason that you should appreciate what you have and bask in it, and really like let yourself appreciate it, because what a waste if like you have it and you let it slip away just because, your focus isn't centered.
You're speaking about going back inside partially. What is the role of like community and the people around us in our life, and perhaps also sometimes colleagues can be I guess, a support system. How has your experience been with that, and what could you add in that respect?
Yeah, I think like having true vulnerable, like real connection with people is the most fulfilling thing in my life, at least, with my family and my friends and my colleagues. I think it's difficult with colleagues because you don't always feel like you can be honest, and that type of connection, it starts with honesty. But absolutely, like when I say, looking inward, I don't mean isolating yourself. I just mean like being more intentional with what makes you feel nourished. For some people, more social activity feels better, and for some people, less. But absolutely, I think like having that honest connection with people makes you feel less alone, which is really important. Makes you feel supported. And I think it's a really huge part in building a life that feels nourishing to you.
Yeah. And I guess, sometimes quiet quitting can, also be like a veil for more critical things like burnout or, depression. And obviously you don't give, medical advice, but how would you approach it if you saw like a friend or a colleague, dealing with such a scenario? Like, when do we need professional support rather than coping strategies?
I think just saying, hey, I noticed this. Is everything okay? Is there anything you want to talk about? I'm here for you. And giving them the floor is extremely valuable. And even being seen can be enough to make people feel better, or at least feel like they have the option to talk about it and to let it out, which is huge. And if this is a coworker, it's, again, sometimes difficult to be honest at work. And so that's when you do have those moments of true connection, it feels even better. It feels extra good because you just don't really expect it. So just like lending an ear, I think, can be really huge. And community is an extremely important part of life in general and navigating uncertainty. Because first of all, like it helps you remember that like everybody experiences it, because it's a part of life that will never go away. And so feeling like you're not so alone in it really, really, really helps. And then, maybe people have been where you are and can give you their perspective, which can be helpful as well. So absolutely leaning on community and being that community that people lean on as well is a huge part of it.
So to wrap up and to leave our listeners with some nuggets, what's one small, honest shift someone could make this week to feel more aligned at work, if you had that golden nugget to give them?
I think do something that you really love and that you find nourishing, whether it's work related or it's not work related. Like if taking a bath feels really nourishing, do that and see how it makes you feel and see what track it opens up for you to follow. Like maybe it inspires you to do something else, or maybe it inspires you to move a little bit differently at work, or have a different conversation that you wouldn't normally have. Again, I think it's like these small baby steps toward, the self that is happy and aligned that will have the biggest effects.
Yeah, thank you. We've seen that quiet quitting isn't, about doing less. It's a signal that something inside of us needs more honesty, more stability, or just simply more care. And when certainty isn't available, the real work becomes staying close to ourselves while, we figure out our next steps. Nicole, thank you so much for this honest and grounding conversation, and for putting words to what a lot of people experience and are quietly living through in this day and age. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you. That was awesome. Thank you.